Hi. Welcome to the part 5 actually, of the uh, Development and World System Theory lecture of the Marxian Economics course. This lecture is part of the lecture series prepared for the Middle East Technical University Northern Cyprus campus. And in the previous part, actually, I have finished by telling that in the pre-19th century era, there were separate world systems, which actually did not encompass whole world, but were only limited. But each system, even though they are actually were encompassing a relatively small area, although it can still be vast like China or Ottoman Empire, but also small like the Greek city-states, for example. They were like a whole world in social and economic sense. They were more or less independent from each other, although some trade might still exist between them. I mean, that trade was basically non-essential items, or based on mostly non-essential items or the luxury items. So there were actually two different type of world systems before 19th century, defined by the World System School. One is the world empire. The other one is the world economy. Well, world empire consists of a large state and some client states that are dependent to that state and kind of their if their rule is also organized and controlled by this large empire, even if they are officially not part of the empire, they are still part of the world empire system, basically. And world empires mainly have an administrative structure. They don't have necessarily nations. The people who are living in the empire don't feel necessarily themselves as part of this one empire, a unique part of it. In some cases, there can be some people who at least at the beginning might own the empire, but usually if the empire lasts long, even that segment doesn't exist for a long time. And basically, the empires consist of this state apparatus, and they also might have this capital city, which is basically built as center of the empire, where the main state apparatus is fixed. And they got from the client states taxes. So, I mean, the resources flow to the center. And in return, however, they provide to the client states and the parts of the empire first security, and then infrastructure, roads, bridges, sometimes resting stations, places like that. So, which allows also the economic interaction within the empire to go on. Security. I mean, not security, but I mean safety measures like safety net type of measures. Like if there is a catastrophe in one section of the empire, then the administrative body of the empire might help to that center that experienced the catastrophe, and regular unique set of rules that are actually rules which might be also supported by a religion, the moral rules that kind of spread to the empire, and that helps to the different people living in different parts of the empire to have a common understanding on what is right and what is wrong when they will deal with themselves. Well, in some cases, those rules might be supported by a code of laws, like the case of Roman Empire. In some cases, by a religion, like the case of Persian Empire or later the Islamic empires. Or there can be something in between, like the China and the Confucius codes, which can also be taught as religion, because the codes extend also the nature and describe a certain order of the whole world and whole universe, but also that order is expanding to the society, and kind of this order is not set by them by a god, so it's not a religion in terms of the deity you can depend on. So kind of in between the Roman case and the Islamic case, maybe. So this aspect of the empires, which you might think about as a redistribution within the empire, was a central economic activity in that spread to the whole empire. Usually, empires didn't have the duties like providing a common education, common healthcare system, or financial regulatory institutions. Those didn't exist in those empires, so those empires were relatively more limited, and most of the I mean, to much larger extent, parts of the empire, especially the villages, were independent, and towns were also less dependent than current case, basically. But whatever economic activity that encompasses the whole empire was mainly can be named as a redistributive economic activity. Meanwhile, there was trade in the empire, but that trade was relatively smaller, less important activity in the empire. It's secondary economic activity, which was also regulated and contained by the state apparatus. On the contrary, when we have world economy, we have many different entities. You might tell them different states, which might be city-states, which might be relatively larger states. But those entities are basically interacting with each other through trade. So the relations that are built by trade, according to the economic powers in many ways of the entities, although military power might also play a role, but that power also kind of is an extension of the trade power in economic power in many cases. And in this kind of system, you don't have any dominant power, which would basically organize all economic activity. So trade and the economic relations and stratification through trade is the main thing that determines the economic relations in this kind of a system. Although you still have ranks of the different entities in this system. And just like you had trade as a secondary activity, in the world economy, you also have one state in all cases, according to World System School, which is strong enough to solve which is not strong enough to control the whole system, dictate the rules basically, organize economic activity by itself, but which is strong enough to solve the systemic problems. I mean, the problems that affect all entities of the world economy. Of course, while solving these problems, because it is the power, it is the main entity that is actually have the ability to solve this problem, or the most suitable entity, it will rather also think its own interest. I mean, it will not necessarily completely paternalistic or altruistic entity, but at least by solving the problems, it also has the function to benefit the whole system. As long as it has this function, it's basically staying as a hegemony. So that particular state is called basically the hegemony. So this type of system contains many more small entities where the people actually feel they are part of that main entity. Actually, we will see more on that in the other main division, which exists in the case of a world economy. Maybe we can also apply this to the world empire, but according to World System School, we are now living in a world economy, so they focus more on the world economy case. In the world economy, you had three entities: core, periphery, and semi-periphery. And in core, the people are more organized, they are more connected to each other, which increases their productivity, which makes them also more difficult to contain, I mean control. So usually the core countries give more rights to its people, at least more wealth, more share from the production. Ancient Athens, for example, was an example which was a democracy. or England or United States, where you have democracy, the countries that are at the core. And because the people are more organized in these countries, however, that also in return creates in these countries the possibility to, makes the people in these countries more productive. As a result, these countries typically produce the most critical, most important goods, commodities for the world economic system, because they can produce those most critical goods, commodities for a cheaper rate, or they have the control of distribution of those critical goods more efficiently. Well, because they create the most critical goods, all other entities of the world economic system, they become dependent of the goods they produce. So basically, the share they got from the global production, the world economy, the production in the world economy system, which can be a small system, by the way, again, to mention it again, is larger. While in the periphery, people are usually less organized. That's why they usually don't have regimes where people have more right in political sense, but they also don't have. They also don't get that much of a share from the production, basically. And if you're at the periphery, but you try to build a democratic system, basically people are not able to protect this democracy. But small interest groups which want to basically resist to the interest of the larger groups, and also want to trade, serve are more in alignment with the interests of the core countries, they become more dominant, they become more available to change the political structure, for example. That's why usually, they dominate, and basically they are able to either regulate the democracy or actually end the democracy in such entities which are in the periphery. So periphery, strong states in periphery might fade, according to, for example, the Wallerstein, for example, who is one of the prominent economists in the World System School. And in return, the people in the periphery are, however, less productive, and as a result, they produce products that are usually the raw materials. They only produce the products for which they have geographic advantage, or some products that are left over which are not critical products. Greek colonies are an example. For example, in case of the ancient Greek world economic system, or in case of for example, Italian states, again, the colonies might be, and in Europe, for example, before European economic system has expanded, Poland could be an example, which might be in the periphery, for example. And then you have semi-periphery. Semi-periphery is kind of the middle way. There, the people are kind of organized, but not as organized as the core. So they got a kind of a middle level of share from the global production, and what they produce are products that are still valuable, but not so critical, not that much critical like the products produced in core countries. Usually, these products are, typical products produced by the semi-peripheral countries are the luxury goods, still expensive but not critical. And this is kind of the semi-periphery is kind of the middle ground of the world economic system, kind of like a middle class of the, similar to the middle class in the typical economic system in a country. So, now we will move to the development of the current economic system, and this will be basically the last part before I answer certain questions related to the current world economic system. And actually, this discussion could be done in a much more sophisticated way, but considering the time strain, I will just make a summary of the discussion of how our world economic system has evolved, and I will basically leave out at the point where we got to the current world economic system, although this discussion could very well continue from there on. But for discourse at this, I will stop there. If you're interested, of course, I can provide you more text on how we can evaluate further how our economic system, how current state of our world economic system has developed. Anyway, see you in the next part. I will continue there.